Why another edition of the Abbey poems? Well, that's a good question, too, because everybody knows that the publishing of a thin volume of poetry in America is a gratuitous act at its best. This has been an interesting little collection. It started out when Dale Champy published, I don't know, maybe it was only 10 or 12 poems in the beginning as a little thin chapbook called the Abbey Poems. He liked the fact that even though the poems used the Abbey as sort of a touchstone, they really went on to discuss and involve themselves in a far greater mystery. The mystery of the universe, of life, of the divine. And he did it, I think, in a, little chapbooks like that. If they do them in an edition of 300 copies, the poet considers themselves lucky. And I think it was 300 copies, which sold out just poof. Because fortunately I have at least 300 friends who would buy my poems, I suppose, regardless of what their topic was, just to be supportive of me. And so a couple of years later, I mentioned to him that I had written several additional poems that would fit into that collection. And so he did an expanded, a second, well, it was the last collection he did before he had his stroke. And about a year later, I took over as editor of the press. And this time, the collection was, I don't know, maybe 17, 18 pages, more poems. And some additional poems that weren't specifically about the Abbey, but things that dealt with my spiritual journey and my observations of whatever the great mystery is in myself. And then one day, I bumped into somebody I really admired who knew one of the poems in the collection. Although he hadn't seen it in the collection, he'd seen it when it had been published in a Christian journal or magazine or review. I can't remember anymore which one published it. And it's a poem called Praying for Stuff, which ends, "When I finally stepped before the throne, I was asked, 'Did you become who you were intended to be?' 'I do not know,' I told God. 'But when I died, I had so much stuff, it took them 3 days to find me.'" So the collection has got humor as well as pathos and wonder. And that was done in an edition of 1,500, which is just unheard of, really, in a chapbook. And I told him at the time it was way too many. But that might have been 1996, 97, something like that. But in 10, 12 years, it sold out. A little word of mouth here, word of mouth there. And then somebody else wanted a copy, and I was down to the only copy I could find besides the archive copies that Lone Willow keeps was one that I had signed to my goddaughter's boyfriend, who in his hurry to chase after her skirt forgot about it, left it here, and then forgot about it, period. And somehow it ended up in a box of stuff. Anyway, and I said, well, I've got one copy and it's signed over to somebody I no longer even remember, but you're welcome to it. And that's about the time I wondered if it was time to do a third edition, and approached my publisher, who indeed thought it was. In fact, thought I should do more than just do a third edition of the collection, but now call it Add Some More. And I think we added 9, maybe 11 poems, some because the Abbey itself has changed. And with that second edition, we'd gotten permission from the abbot at the Abbey to use one of their logos on the cover, the picture of the towers itself, the famous Basilica Towers at Conception Abbey. As an artistic representation of those towers, not a photograph. At any rate, so I added some more poems to the collection and sent it off, and it's now available. For those of you who have written and wanted to get a copy of the Conception Abbey poems, and who've said that, there are Hindus and Buddhists and agnostics and atheists who enjoy these poems because the Abbey is a touchstone that deals with a greater mystery. And I do it pretty well in metaphor and stuff, I think. So get thee to Amazon.com. Pick up a copy and buy a copy for every single one of your friends this Christmas.